Good morning, everybody. My name's Byrne. I work for the National Standards Authority of Ireland, and today I'm just going to have a quick chat with you about a relatively new document called SR54, and then go into a bit of detail on some of the various retrofit standards and examples of construction that we see on our roads. So SR54, it's a national code of practice for the energy efficient retrofit of dwellings. It was developed by the Department of the Environment, the Department of Energy, ourselves, and the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. There's nothing new in the document, it's just basically a combination of the various standards and technical guidance that existed out there, but it's put it into the one location. So it gives technical guidance on energy efficient retrofit, the application of different renovation and retrofit measures. It also looks at some general building science and also advice on how to manage renovation projects, because we found in our discussions when we were doing it that a lot of people had project management skills but didn't actually know how to manage a full deep retrofit project. It's based on the most recent standards and technical guidance, which means it's a live document. This is a code of practice that will continue to evolve as regulations change, as new standards come on board. The intended users, anybody in the retrofit and renovation industry, so whether it's architects, designers, property managers. It does assume that the users have appropriate qualifications and knowledge and experience in the retrofit market. It's written at a certain level. Now, it doesn't mean the homeowners couldn't pick it up and get some tips and advice, but it is quite a technical document. So the idea is that users can go to the relevant technical section. So if you're working on a retrofit project that's looking at roofs and walls, you can go to a particular section for that type of construction and get some idea on what types of products you can use. It provides examples of performance, but it's important to note it does not set performance levels. Those performance levels will continue to be set by the National Building Regulations and any various standards that exist in the marketplace. The intended use is to be referred to by retrofit schemes and to give guidance. It's not a compliance document. You're not going to see tenders, you're not going to see procedures out there that are going to say this must be done in accordance with SR54. They can point you towards it, but it's not something you could be audited against, because again, it's a recommendation, it's guidance, it's not compliance. It deals with the building fabric and services, so it will look at typical existing constructions in different types of houses that exist in Ireland. It will list out appropriate retrofit and renovation measures for those types of construction, and also give detailed design issues and installation considerations for each measure. So this is an example of a case study. There's a number of case studies within the document. This one looks at a typical semi-detached end of terrace property. It gives the year of construction, the type of build-up that you will find. These case studies are particularly useful for anybody who's doing BER, building energy rating assessments, because when you go to an existing building, you might not necessarily know what type of insulation you have, what type of boiler you have. So these case studies are very useful for that. The types of design considerations we look at: disruption to occupants. Depending on what measure you're getting done, you may have to leave the house. Like internal dry lining usually means you've got to vacate the property. Something like full fill cavity wall insulation, external insulation, you can still maintain access to the property. Adaptation of roof lines. Again, with external insulation, if you don't have sufficient overhang of the roof to make sure that the water will come away from the walls, you'll have to extend the roof line either with flashing or with slates and flashings. Public footpath encroachment. Again, it's an external insulation measure. If your house is on a public footpath, there's an issue of title there. You've got to contact your local authority and make sure you have their permission to encroach onto that footpath. External services, Electric Ireland, Board Gas, they have their own requirements and literature out there on what should be done in the retrofit industry with their gas meter boxes and electric cables. Impact resistance. Again, with external insulation, there's different build-ups you can get that will be resistant to certain impact, whether it's access to the property is just private, so it's with people who have a duty of care to the property, or whether it's public access. Now the document SR54, it's quite big, it's about 280 pages. It's free to download on our website. Just go to nsai.ie/SR54, or you can give your name and address at stand 110, which is where I'll be most of the day, and we can post it out to you. Though I will say there is a postage cost of €10, because again, it's quite a big document, so we do encourage people to go online. So looking at some of the practical issues that NSAR has come across in the insulation and construction industry, with external insulation, some of the issues we come across, thermal bridging. You're wrapping the building completely. If you don't eliminate all of the cold bridges, which would be uninsulated areas, you're going to accelerate the flow of heat and warm air through that area, which can lead to mold growth, condensation, and problems to health. No fire barrier installed. We insist on a vertical fire barrier being installed between properties, whether the neighbouring property is going to receive insulation or not. Over in Germany, the duty of care is on the person who gets insulated second. So the first property doesn't have to put in a fire barrier. But we felt that it would be better off that when you go in, you put your fire barrier in, and then it doesn't matter what happens next. Ventilation is a critical issue with external insulation. Again, you're wrapping your building with insulation and an airtight render. So you're increasing the airtightness of the dwelling. You're also removing unwanted drafts and gaps in the building fabric. So where you might not have had an issue with air quality before, you will now, unless you have sufficient ventilation installed. Penetration's not sealed, that's around waste pipes, even around windows and window frames. If they're not sealed properly, you can get water ingress, which will lead to a lot of problems behind the insulation board. Guttering, again, just simple attention to detail, making sure that there's good water management of the property. Maintenance, these external insulation systems, they're not maintenance free. A lot of people think that they're zero maintenance. They're not. You've got to clean the walls, particularly in areas where they're susceptible to algal growth with a high mineral or plant content in the garden. And use of renders in hot or cold weather. Most of these products, they cannot be used if the temperature is going to be below 5 degrees or above 25 degrees for a simultaneous 72-hour period. Now again, the cold weather is really what we look at in Ireland, but a couple of summers ago we did have cases where we had to stop sites because the temperature was 28, 30 degrees, and it meant that the renders were actually melting on the walls. So some practical examples here. This is one where the external insulation has gone onto the gable wall and it's completely blocked the ventilation in the soffit board. In that case, they'd have to put little discs, weathered ventilation grills onto the soffit board to make sure that ventilation into the attic space is maintained. This wall shows, you might see there's a number of blisters here and here. That's caused by the render being applied in the wrong weather conditions. It hasn't bonded properly to the base coat or primer, and then it's delaminated, so it's blistered up. What you would do in that case is you'd have to scrape off the entire finish and recoat, which can be quite an expensive job. This next one is kind of water management. They've made an attempt here at the top to extend the roof line with a barge board, but you can see they haven't extended out the guttering or the flashing. You have a lot of moisture coming down here, and the render has started to peel. Again, poor water management. The image on your left-hand side, there's no flashing, there's no protection to the insulation board at all, and it's completely saturated and will continue to be. The picture on the right is a particularly bad example where the windowsill wasn't properly protected, so you've got a lot of dampness and algae growth in the corner. And again, there was damage done to the window reveal that wasn't repaired, water has got in, and it's led to a rather disgusting but impressive mold growth. This one again, the image on the left, very poor attention to detail. You can see they made a poor attempt to do a flashing over the insulation board, but left about 3 or 4 inches on the side. And on the right hand side, there's no seal, no bead between the insulation and the window frame. You will get water ingress in that point, which can come into the property or go behind the reveal board and potentially could lead to blowout. This next is 2 pictures of the same property, just one of them zooms in. Not only has the insulation board at the downpipe not been wrapped and protected from the atmosphere and from the environment, it's also an EPS board and an XPS board at the bottom. It is not a fire barrier, so again that would not be compliant with the fire requirements. This next one, the installer, he cut the windowsill, didn't cut it to proper length, and made a rather poor attempt to try and patch it up at the bottom just by throwing in some dried ash stones, and he painted the gap at the top to try and make out that it was actually done properly. Again, if it's not properly insulated, you will get water ingress. This next one on the left-hand side, you have a gas meter box. Board gas require that gas meter boxes be disconnected temporarily and brought flush to the front of the external insulation board. This is because there are a number of gas meter boxes that exist where they vent gas out the back of the box. So if they're encapsulated within the insulation, there's a potential for gas to come up behind the insulation board and enter the property. And on the right-hand side, it's an electric box. Danger, keep away, and the installer has insulated right up close to it. This next one is more of a kind of a spot the difference. There's 5 houses in that terrace have been insulated. The ones on each end have been done by one contractor, the 3 in the middle by another. You notice maybe the 3 in the middle, they have these conduits on the outside, which is carrying thick electric cables. You don't see those conduits on the 2 houses on the end, which leads us to believe that they've been buried behind the insulation board. They may or may not have been carried in conduits, and if they're in contact with EPS insulation, you can get a leaching effect with the plasticizer, which will cause the cable to break down. On full-fill cavity wall insulation, some of the problems you come across: wrong drill pattern. Our certificates recommend a drill pattern to ensure full fill of the wall when you pump the cavity insulation. Insufficient examination of an existing cavity. Before a cavity wall is pumped, the installer must carry out a boroscope inspection where he drills a hole and looks in to check for signs of dampness. Ventilation, it's not as critical with cavity wall as it is for external insulation. What you're looking at with cavity wall is that any vents that are there or that are put in must be properly sleeved, otherwise you'll get ventilation spilling out into the property. Existing partial fill, that's where you have a partial fill board there before you pump. Our certificates have various requirements depending what that insulation material is and what insulation material you're pumping. And also unsuitable location and construction. We have a map in our certificates that splits the country into normal and severe exposure zones, and there's limitations on what type of construction you can have. I only have one picture for cavity wall, but it's rather impressive. It's where the installer didn't properly survey the dwelling and make sure that there was absolutely no possibility that the cavity wall insulation could enter the property. So he's drilled this hole, he's pumping on the outside for 5, 10, 15 minutes. The pump hasn't kicked back to let him know that it's full. He doesn't know what's going on. He hears a yell from inside, walks in, and all of his insulation he's been pumping for those 15 minutes is down the walls, into the floor in the hall, and is spilled out through the meter box. Again, poor attention to detail. So for further information on any of our insulation installer schemes, SR54, any construction standards or standards committees, go to our website nsai.ie. Myself and my colleagues will be manning stand 110, which is just behind that partition. So if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, you can come and visit me there. Thank you for your attention.